The doctor's room smelled like disinfectant and quiet endings. I sat on the edge of the chair, hands folded so tightly my fingers trembled. He kept looking at the file instead of at me, as if my face might accuse him of something he couldn't undo. "Terminal stomach cancer," he said finally, voice low and careful. "We can manage the pain, slow it a little, but realistically 6 months. 6 months." The words didn't explode. They sank slow, heavy, and cold straight into my chest. I nodded like I understood, like I was brave, like my entire future hadn't just been folded into a single sentence. When I walked out of the hospital, the sun was shining, people were laughing, traffic was loud. The world had not stopped for me. That hurt almost as much as the diagnosis. I rehearsed what I would say to my husband on the way home. "We'll fight this together. I'm scared. I need you. I believed love would be stronger than fear. I was wrong." He didn't touch me when I told him. He didn't ask how I felt. He read the report twice, then looked up with narrowed eyes. "How much will treatment cost?" he asked. I waited for the hug that never came, the tears that never appeared. Instead, numbers replaced compassion. Days later, the change became obvious. He stayed out late. He stopped bringing medicine. When I vomited at night, he turned his back. When I cried, he sighed like I was an inconvenience. "You're always sick," he muttered once. "This house feels like a hospital." I began to feel like a ghost in my own marriage, present, but unwanted. Bills piled up, so did resentment. One evening, after a particularly bad hospital visit, I found him shouting into his phone in the kitchen. "She's dying anyway," he said. "I can't destroy my life over this." He noticed me standing there, didn't apologize, didn't lower his voice. That night, the argument exploded. I asked for emotional support. He accused me of ruining his future. I begged him to stay. He called me a burden. Then he opened the door. "Get out," he said, throwing my small bag at my feet. I didn't marry a corpse. The clock read 11:47 p.m. I stood frozen, waiting for him to take it back, waiting for a crack in his anger where love might still be hiding. But the door slammed shut, final and loud, shaking the walls, and something inside me shattered with it. The street was empty, cold. My stomach burned with pain, my heart with disbelief. I walked because standing still felt like dying faster. Each step felt heavier than the last. Every memory came back. Our wedding promises, the way he once said he'd never leave me. I laughed bitterly through tears. People promise many things when life is easy. The bridge appeared ahead, dark against the city lights. Cars rushed past, unaware of the woman whose entire life had collapsed in a single night. I leaned on the railing, feeling the wind cut through my thin clothes. I thought of the doctor's words, 6 months, maybe less, no home, no husband, no strength left. The pain in my stomach twisted sharply, stealing my breath. For the first time since the diagnosis, I wasn't afraid of dying. I was tired of surviving alone. I climbed onto the railing, tears blurring the lights below. My hands shook, my mind screamed, but my heart felt strangely quiet. This, I thought, is how my story ends. I didn't know yet that destiny was about to interrupt me, not with money, not with medicine, but with something far smaller and far more powerful. A child's voice. The wind howled across the bridge, sharp and unforgiving, as if it were trying to push me toward the decision I had already half made. Below me, dark water swallowed the reflections of streetlights, stretching endlessly, silently inviting. My fingers clutched the cold metal railing, numb from both the chill and the weight of my thoughts. I closed my eyes. Faces from my past appeared. My younger self with hopeful dreams, the woman who believed love was forever, the wife who trusted vows spoken so easily. I wondered when I had become someone so disposable, someone whose sickness erased her worth. A sharp pain twisted in my stomach, forcing a quiet cry from my lips. I bent forward, fighting dizziness, feeling my body betray me yet again. Maybe my husband was right. Maybe I was already gone, just a breathing shadow waiting for the inevitable. That was when I heard it. "Auntie, why are you crying?" The voice was small, unafraid, real. I turned slowly, my heart hammering, half expecting no one to be there. But a boy stood a few steps away, no older than 8 or 9. His hair was messy, his face smudged with dirt, and his shirt hung loosely on his thin frame. A large plastic bag, filled with empty bottles, rested against his leg. I wiped my face quickly, embarrassed to be seen like this. "You shouldn't be here." I whispered, "It's late." He shrugged. "I collect bottles at night, less traffic." Then he looked at my face again, studying me in a way adults never did. Without judgment. "You look like you're hurting inside." Something broke open in my chest. "I'm fine." I lied, my voice cracking. He didn't believe me. He stepped closer, careful but curious. "My mother cries like that when she thinks I'm asleep," he said softly. "She says it's because life is heavy. Life is heavy." The words echoed louder than the traffic around us. The boy reached into his pocket and pulled out a few crumpled notes and coins. He counted them carefully, his lips moving as he did. Then he held them out to me in his small, trembling hand. "I have $5, he said. "I was going to buy bread, but you can take it." I stared at the money, stunned. "Why?" I asked. He looked confused by the question. "Because you look like you need help more than me right now." And my knees gave out. I sank to the ground, sobbing uncontrollably, the sound ripping from my chest like a wound reopening. I didn't care who saw. I didn't care about pride. I cared about the fact that a child who had nothing was offering me everything he had. I took his hand, closing his fingers back around the money. "Keep it." I whispered through tears, "You need it." He shook his head stubbornly. "My mother says when you save someone, God saves you back." I laughed and cried at the same time. The boy didn't touch me or pull me away from the railing. He didn't lecture or beg. He simply sat beside me, swinging his legs, talking about his day, how many bottles he collected, how he wanted to go to school, how his favorite food was rice with lentils. Slowly, the noise in my head quieted. The bridge no longer looked like an ending. It looked like a place I had almost disappeared from. After a while, he stood. "You should go somewhere warm," he said seriously. "People need you, people." No one had said that to me in a long time. I climbed down from the railing, my legs weak, but my heart awake. When I turned to thank him, he was already walking away, plastic bag rustling behind him, his small silhouette swallowed by the night. In my palm, he had secretly left the $5. I clutched it like a lifeline. That night, on the edge of a bridge, a child with empty pockets gave me a reason to live. And I promised myself, if I survived the night, I would make that $5 mean something. I spent the rest of that night sitting on a bench near the bridge, clutching the $5 as if it were a sacred promise. The city slowly grew quieter, and with each passing hour, my breathing steadied. The urge to disappear didn't vanish completely, but it loosened its grip. For the first time since my diagnosis, I felt something unfamiliar stir inside me. Responsibility, not the kind that drains you, but the kind that gives you a reason to stay. At dawn, I walked to a nearby shelter. My legs ached, my stomach burned, and my head felt light, but I kept going. When the volunteer at the desk asked my name, my voice shook as I told her everything. The cancer, the husband who had thrown me out, the bridge, the child. She didn't rush me. She didn't judge me. She simply held my hand and said, "You're safe here." Those words became my anchor. Through the shelter, I was connected to a nurse who specialized in oncology care for patients with limited resources. She explained options I hadn't known existed: pain management programs, donated medicines, support groups. None of it was a miracle cure. I was still terminal, but I wasn't abandoned anymore. Days passed slowly, measured by medication schedules and waves of exhaustion. Some mornings I could barely sit up. Other days I felt almost normal, which scared me more than the pain. I learned to live in the present because the future had become too fragile to hold. I started attending a support group at the hospital. At first, I only listened. There were women younger than me, older than me, mothers, daughters, fighters. Each story carried its own kind of sorrow. One afternoon, without planning to, I spoke. I was kicked out because I'm dying. I said quietly, but a child saved my life with $5. The room fell silent. After that day, people began sitting closer to me, asking questions, smiling. I realized my pain had turned into something useful. It helped others feel less alone. I began volunteering at the pediatric ward on the days I felt strong enough. I read stories to children who were scared of needles and machines. I told them funny lies about hospital food being cooked by secret superheroes. Their laughter didn't cure me, but it healed something deeper. One evening I saw him again, the boy from the bridge. He was outside the hospital gate collecting bottles, his familiar plastic bag dragging behind him. My heart raced. I called out to him, and he turned, surprised, then smiled when he recognized me. "You didn't jump," he said simply. "No," I replied, kneeling slowly, "because of you." I took him to a nearby food stall and bought him a full meal. He ate carefully, like someone who had learned not to waste blessings. I asked about his family, his school dreams, his favorite subjects. When he told me he had never been inside a classroom, something inside me hardened not with anger, but with determination. I arranged help through a local charity, school admission, books, uniform, not as a grand gesture, but as a promise kept. The $5 had multiplied not in money, but in meaning. Meanwhile, my husband's absence faded into something distant. I stopped waiting for his apology, stopped imagining his regret. My world had become smaller, but richer, filled with moments that mattered. I was still dying, but for the first time, I wasn't just waiting for the end. I was living on borrowed time, yes, but time that now belonged to me. And somewhere deep inside, I knew this was not the end of my story. It was the beginning of my quiet revenge, becoming someone my past could never break again. By the time my body began to weaken for good, my heart had grown stronger than it had ever been. Pain became a familiar companion, sometimes loud, sometimes distant, but it no longer defined me. What defined me were the lives I had touched, the hands I had held, and the quiet peace that settled inside my chest like a long, awaited sunrise. Word travels quickly in small circles. One afternoon, as I sat in the garden outside the care center, wrapped in a thin shawl, I saw a familiar figure hesitate at the gate. My husband, he looked smaller than I remembered, older. The sharp confidence he once wore so proudly had been replaced by something fragile and desperate. His eyes found me, and in them I saw shock, not at my illness, but at my calm. "I've been looking for you," he said, voice breaking as he stepped closer. I didn't know where else to go. I smiled gently, not because I was happy to see him, but because I no longer needed anything from him. "I heard you were sick," he continued, swallowing hard. "The business failed. Everyone left. I made a mistake." I listened quietly, the way I listened to children at the hospital when they confessed their fears. There was no anger rising in me, no hunger for revenge, only clarity. "You didn't make a mistake," I said softly. "You made a choice." He knelt in front of me, tears spilling freely now. "I was afraid," he whispered. "I couldn't watch you die." I looked at him, really looked at him, and understood something that freed me completely. "Love doesn't leave when things get hard." I replied, "It stays, even when it's scared." From my bag, I took out an envelope I had prepared weeks earlier. I placed it in his shaking hands. Inside was a letter. You abandoned me at my weakest. A child with nothing saved me. I found strength, purpose, and peace without you. There was also a small donation receipt, money set aside for the boy's education, funded by the stories I had written, the talks I had given, the kindness others had returned to me. This is who I became after you left, I said calmly, and this is why I don't need to come back. He sobbed openly, but I felt no satisfaction in his pain. My revenge was not his suffering, it was my survival. He asked for forgiveness, and I gave it not for him, but for myself. Forgiveness was lighter than hatred, and I had no strength left to carry heavy things. He left quietly, shoulders bent under the weight of a lesson learned too late. Weeks later, my body finally began to fail. I spent my days surrounded by nurses, children's drawings taped to the walls, and the boy who now came to visit me in his school uniform, proudly reading aloud from his books. Because of you, I want to help people, he told me one afternoon. I closed my eyes, smiling through tears. That night, as the world softened around me, I felt no fear. I had been loved by strangers, saved by a child, and reborn through compassion. I did not leave this world as a woman who was kicked out, abandoned, or broken. I left as someone who turned $5 into a lifetime of meaning, and that was the sweetest revenge of all.